And this next one is 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves was also in the news, but very different kind of story. And this one was 100 Thieves lay off more than a dozen staff on social media and their content teams. Now, before I get into the what some of the article talked about, it's incredible that in the same week, right, FaZe going public, describing themselves as an online media company employing mostly content creators. In the same week, 100 Thieves lays off content creators. And so, it says they laid off multiple long-standing employees across their social media and content teams. It's a major shakeup. More than a dozen people, including senior people. I won't name names. It's very, obviously it's unfortunate for them. The layoffs are never fun. Always always want to make sure that that's clear. We don't think this is good news, obviously. And we hope these people land on their feet. But I would love for you guys to get your thoughts on this contrast, right? Where you have FaZe really pushing the language in this direction, and then 100 Thieves seemingly backing off from it. I'm curious what you guys make of it. Jimmy?
This is a sad story, obviously. I love the 100 Thieves brand. I've always thought that they had an interesting approach on the merchandising side of things. We criticize hoodie orgs a lot here, and I thought at the very least that a lot of what they did with merch, with exclusive drops, with seasonal drops, with the luxury collabs, it definitely spoke to my interests. Doesn't hurt that I'm a huge Drake fan and he's one of their Series A investors with Scooter Braun, but it kind of casts a shadow on the otherwise great news with the FaZe SPAC and with the XSET Series A. And you got to wonder, after they had just raised such a significant Series C round not more than 2-3 months ago, what are they doing that they need to, I think, take a step back or refocus or change what that approach is? So I'm not sure, honestly, what the thinking is going on there. Maybe they're just trying to get a little leaner because they realize that they can't just keep raising and keep spending, that they're going to have to, fix that model, and they're doing it now. But obviously it's not without cost and a kind of a sad story for even some really tenured employees that they've had over there. I noticed, this isn't just the 2.5% across the top that we covered last week with Niantic and Unity and Corsair and a few others. This seems more strategic, right? That they're looking at their business model, they're looking at what works, what doesn't, looking at what they need to do to get to their own SPAC public listing or exit of some sort, and saying, they're difficult things to do, and I would defer to you and Jeff in particular on the strategy behind that. But this doesn't seem like they're having difficulties with the market or difficulties with just the current state of things. This seems really intentional. So I'm curious, Jeff, if you want to take over.
I think it's a good. The last piece is interesting on the intentional. I was going to kind of just relate it to the broader market. I mean, it seems a bit of like a sign of the times. A lot of these businesses, not even just in esports, I mean, we've seen it across a lot of tech and startups, raised a good amount of money, call it 6 months, 8 months ago, and had business plans that were very ambitious and included them burning a lot of capital and getting to their next round probably a year later. And now you're halfway through that business plan and your investors are saying, hey, well, look, the interest isn't necessarily there for your next round, or the valuations are going to be lower. You need to cut your burn rate. So, we've seen even like very strong companies, like I would describe, the ones you mentioned, Niantic, Unity, like these are much, much stronger, better positioned companies, than 100 Thieves having to do big layoffs. So I think it is a little bit just emblematic of where we are in the economic cycle and maybe just the investing cycle. But I'll let the other, Lindsay, maybe if you want to chime in on Paul's specific question around like the content creators with the dichotomy versus FaZe. I don't necessarily know if I have great insights into that specific piece.
I feel like there's multiple stories to tell about what's going on here, especially as it relates to FaZe. One of the stories is obviously like, 100 Thieves isn't doing as well. I think it's really easy to look and make that conclusion, and they had to lay off people. I think that I think it speaks more to what Jimmy was saying. It's a difference in mentality. I think that FaZe is definitely a Silicon Valley grow at all costs, more kind of energy type of company. Whereas I definitely read this as 100 Thieves looking at its revenue model and actually figuring out where to trim to become more profitable. Even though that's obviously a super unfortunate consequence for the people who lost their jobs. But the reality is not every company makes enough money to keep everyone hired. So it does happen. When it comes to the content creation versus, I guess more traditional competition and esports side, I feel like I say this every week, but the model isn't there yet for anyone. So I don't necessarily, whatever FaZe is selling, I'm not sure if I'm buying it, but I could say the same thing for 100 Thieves, even if I feel like they're making moves that put them in a leaner, more profit-driven direction. I guess, I don't know. I'm wondering if they even want to go public or if they're just concerned with making sure that their revenue projections are hit this year, and thus the reason for the layoffs. I think it's a mistake to put these two next to each other because I think it shows like totally different strategies. So comparing them or saying that one is better than the other, I think it's just a little bit too early for that. I do think it's interesting that they're both kind of based more on content creation. Although, like I said, I feel like FaZe is more lifestyle content. 100 Thieves is more gaming content. They both do some of the other, of course. I think it's interesting that they're both based on that, though, and they're kind of taking different overall like company strategies. So I guess we'll see what works
Lindsay,
out.
is this, sorry, Paul, if I could ask a question, is this a shift that you're seeing now, or would you have always described 100 Thieves in that manner? Because I personally at least never viewed 100 Thieves as like this pragmatic, like fiscal company that was like, accounting.
Yeah.
It's like, they're building a video game division. They announced that like 3 months ago. Like, hey, we're going to just build a video game. Like, how cool would that be if we just decided to build a video game? They built like a multi-million-dollar compound. It's like, I wouldn't have
that's
described
definitely a
that
now
as, like,
thing. I see it more as like a sign of the times, a sign of the general downturn. That kind of thing. I don't think that this has been their long-term strategy. I'm talking about like this week, these stories, that's what it looks like. And taking into account the broader economic direction that we're all going in. Like that's very much this is what's happening right now thing.
But you guys are kind of proving my point that I've made for a long time now, is that 100 Thieves management is sort of out of their depth, right? Like the business has grown beyond their capabilities, and now the one signal I always point to when I see that is like when you're just reacting, right? When there's no like clear vision, plan, methodical, right? Like when you just react, the economy's down, fire, right? Like the second point I wanted to make was, does anyone really think 100 Thieves ever did very good at content creation? Like FaZe, you could make that point, right? They were very big on YouTube before, anyone was really talking about FaZe even, right? Like in the mainstream. 100 Thieves, like other than their Cash App compound facility tour, which by the way is like the only video, that and the Courage like joining 100 Thieves announcement video. Those are the only two videos mentioned in this article. Like if your greatest content pieces are your facility tour and someone joining the org, are you really a content business, right? Like is content really your expertise? Maybe it's a bit of self-awareness that they're just not that good at content, is what it could be, right? Matt says, should this be a reason to worry about the industry? 100 Thieves has always seemed like a leader. If they're struggling, you have to imagine others are struggling too. I want to point that Matt's great question. I want to point you to this article. I mentioned it on the podcast. Alex Lee wrote it, our good friend at Digiday. I'm quoted in the article. I highly recommend everyone go check it out. How recession-proof is the esports industry? It's about a week old now, but a great piece that Alex put together at Digiday. Jam says, personally, I don't see this as a sign of 100 Thieves struggling. I think they maybe overgrew and are having to trim things back to find balance. Yeah, I think it probably went like this, right? They had an investor call or something, some kind of update call. The investors are going, hey guys, we're a little worried about the economy. Like, maybe the next check won't come so fast and furious. And so it's like react. But I don't know. Would have loved to have been the fly on the wall in that room. Project says, I think you could also look at it as maybe 100 Thieves are pulling out of a certain content-based game because it's not as profitable. I don't see them struggling now or in the future. I mean, I don't know if I agree. Content can be very profitable. It's just, I don't know if 100 Thieves is that good at it. JM says, I second that, which I think, JM, you were referring to Project's comment here, but also maybe the fact that 100 Thieves is not that good at content. I don't know. Do you guys think that this is a more surgical, right? The fact that they only cut in social media and content, it's there's some realization that this is not their focus?
Maybe. I mean, I think I agree with the last piece. I don't see that this is like the end of 100 Thieves. I mean, they're still very tip-top org. Like, so, we're not trying to call that they're worth nothing or that they're going to disappear. It's just the sign of the time. I don't know, to answer your last question more specifically, I don't know whether this is hey, we're just recognizing we're not that good at content, so we're pulling back a little bit on it. I hope that's not the case, because that would be much more bearish than what I just said. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm going to mispronounce this. Heflamoke says, sorry if I totally mispronounced that. If every esports team has to transform into agencies, content factories, etc., maybe the market is also simply saturated. Everybody does it. I think that's a good point, right? Like, there for a long time was a very clear lack of differentiation, right? Like, was TSM really that different than 100 Thieves, or really that different from, esports org XYZ? I think there has been a struggle for a long time to just be different or find some point of differentiation. Heflamoke also says, also consolidation for 100 Thieves isn't bad. Some of these content creators are heavily overpaid and in a region they don't need to be. To tweet, you don't need a U.S. citizen. This is true. As someone who has just left the U.S.
Nobody tell this to YouTube gaming.
Yeah, someone tell this to YouTube gaming. It's true. It's both great points, Heflamoke. Totally agree.